Welcome, everybody. This is another episode of Grow Your Grass Off. My name is Brandon. I'm joined today by Greg Knibbs. He is a fantastic permaculture teacher, installer, and he's got a wealth of information to share. I'm really excited about this episode because I think you're going to really see the details that can be a lot of times overlooked. You know, these things about what do we do when we approach a landscape and a project where we have to take care of all these different areas. And so Greg's expertise really comes to light here. And so I'm really excited to have you on the show, Greg. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, look, thanks for having me here today, Brandon. Great to be here.
Awesome. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted people to really know about you is what's your story? What is it that you've gone through, to become the expert that you are now? And so yeah, take us through that progression for us.
Okay, well, yeah, look, I'll try and sort of condense it down just to give people a little bit of a background. I'm 63 now, but I first met Bill Mollison when I was about 16 in the 70s. And I met Bill, well, when I say I met Bill, I came across him. Bill was at a alternative lifestyle festival. And at that time, I was doing an apprenticeship in turf management. This was about probably 1976, if the timeline's right. And it was just outside of Richmond in New South Wales. And Bill was there. I came across Bill. He was in an old pair of pants and a blue rolled up shirt, had a packet Winfield glue in his pocket. And he's talking about using an old horsehair mattress to grow food. And he had some paper and he had a few potatoes there. And he said, oh, if you just put the spud down and the paper over it and then the mattress on top, and then it will all grow, and you come back in a couple of months and you'll have a set of spuds without doing much. And I think he had a little bag of manure and he sprinkled some manure on. And I thought, oh, this guy's completely off his rocker. Anyway, I sort of, and at the time Bill was chain smoking too. And I walked on, and then I came across him the next day, and he was sort of rambling on about some other type of gardening. And I thought, oh yeah. Anyway, the weekend was over and I went back to my turf management. And then about a month later, I came across Bill again at it was an organic garden festival. And I listened to him speak and I thought, oh, gee, this guy's starting to make a bit of sense. Anyway, that was, 1976. That was before Bill had even came up with the term permaculture. As we know, Bill and Dave Holmgren, they're the co-founders of Permaculture. Obviously, the first design course, I think, was Bill taught in about 1983, I think it was. I didn't really, at the time, there was no internet back then. I came across the odd permaculture magazine. I didn't really know what it was. I thought it was about growing food. I didn't realise it was about design. But I eventually, in about 92, I think it was, I did my first design course with Dave Holmgren and a lady called Lee Harrison in Kangaroo Valley in New South Wales in Australia. And I think that was one of the first courses Dave ever taught. And I remember, the first couple of days, I was just blown away by the information I was receiving. And, after 12 days of intense learning, and I remember there was me and another guy and Dave, we, several nights we stayed up discussing the plight of the world and what could be done about it. And anyway, the 12 days ended and I thought, my God, what did I just learn? It was just pretty overwhelming, all the information that I learned. But I didn't do much with it for probably 4 or 5 years, it sat there with me and I got on with what I was doing. At that time, I was doing commercial horticultural maintenance and re-veg work, and I ended up doing tree surgery. And so I had a whole range of contracts, and so I didn't really do much with permaculture, but it sat around in the back of my head. But then I thought I wouldn't mind teaching permaculture. And I started looking at how I could start doing that. And one of the first things I did was I didn't have the confidence to teach adults, so I started teaching in a childcare centre, just building food gardens on a Friday afternoon with some kids in a childcare centre and the teachers. And it slowly progressed from there. I went to another school where my son was attending, and we did a bit of work there, but it wasn't really until I think it was about 1997, I went to the Philippines for a year and I started teaching over there. But before I left, I started developing my own curriculum because I decided to do a diploma under Bill in permaculture. So it took me about 3 to 4 years to do the 2 years of applied work. But so that applied work was in the Philippines for a year. And before I left for the Philippines, I had started building a straw bale house here in Hilton, where I live. Hilton's a suburb of Fremantle in Western Australia. So, I started building the straw bale house. I started writing my own curriculum. And when I started writing my own curriculum, as I was doing that, one day it all just fell into place. Oh, this is permaculture. Before I started writing the curriculum, I thought, oh, there must be something else to permaculture. And just yesterday, I had a meeting with Lisa Mollison. Lisa and I were discussing, and Dave Spicer, who was going to be here today, but he couldn't make it, but I know you're going to have a chat with him in the next coming days. Dave talks about analysis by paralysis, that people feel paralyzed to do something once they've done a design course because there's so much to learn and so much to apply. But Lisa was talking about how we can overcome that. And she used to say, well, Bill used to just say, do 1 to 2 to 3 things. And Dave Spicer will talk more on this because he's the master earth surgeon. Dave and I do a bit of collaboration. Dave will do the mainframe design work, access sort of structure and water, and then I'll come over and put the living system on it. But Dave talks about just getting those couple of things right, getting the built environment right, getting your access right, and getting the water right. And we know design follows water. So it's important to understand that. So when I started writing my curriculum, things just fell into place, and I thought, oh, that's how permaculture works. And so from 1976 up until now, it's been a lot of self-learning. And one of the things I picked up from Bill, yes, we can do a permaculture design course, but really the design course is really just an introduction to permaculture design. And what I'd like to emphasize too, the actual design course is about design. We do talk about how to build a garden. We do talk about the soil food web, but we don't, in a design course, we don't really have that time to do practical application for those processes. So it's really, this is my view, and probably the view of what Bill used to promote, is the design course is the methodology of design, okay? So I think it's really important to understand that that is the methodology of design, not so much doing practical application. But once you've done the PDC, then you can self-learn, self-research, and then you can do permaculture application. And that's how we learn. And it's okay to make mistakes. I think this is the biggest thing we've got to get through to people as we learn. And, you know, from 76 up until now, I've made plenty of mistakes, you know, in my personal life, in my permaculture life, in teaching permaculture, in my commercial operations in the past. So, yeah, look at the other thing I would say, and we'll probably move on to something else, it's all about the scalability of permaculture too. What do you actually want to do, particularly with gardening? You know, the average person probably, you know, to grow vegetables for one person, you need probably 10 square meters. To grow some spuds, you'd probably need another 10. And to grow your fruits, you probably need 45 to 60 square meters. And then if you want to grow some grain, you probably need maybe another 20 to 30 square meters, depending on how much you want to grow. But it's all about scalability, where you are right now. Are you in an urban environment? You know, are you in a unit? Do you have land? And I think the thing to remember is don't stress about all this. I feel there's a lot of eco-anxiety out there, you know. I see it all the time. People are stressed and they're pressured. But I think the best thing to do is just take a step back and just sit down, take some time out of the day and just sit in silence and connect with your breathing, you know, and just take some time out.
Yeah, that's a good segue. Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. I think that permaculture, this is kind of, I think it's great because we're going along that vein where you sort of frame it. And so I had somebody tell me once, I was on a volunteer day, you know, at a farm, and I was just getting into it and learning about permaculture. Kind of, it was new, and what she explained to me was really helpful. It's that, you know, it's kind of like a lens or glasses that you can look through, you know, that you can see all of a sudden when you take the PDC or you learn about permaculture. It's not so much that it, like you said, that it's, you can all of a sudden go out there and do things practically, you know, and that application, which is, you need time and experience to get that. But that when you have those glasses on, all of a sudden you make these connections and these things make more sense, you know, as far as designing holistically and being able to, all of a sudden you have the ability to create more synergies within your systems, your food systems, you know, your even your house, right? So you're connecting all of these things that you have inputs, outputs, and it sounds complicated, but at the end of the day, it's trying to harmonize that entire collection of things that is your life, you know, and you can even go into zone zero, which I know you like to get into that, which is more of kind of the psychology of how we approach life, which I think is excellent because, you know, that's, we can't leave that out, you know. But let's go ahead and move on to this other topic, which is, you know, why do you think it's important for people these days to grow a garden? Why is it that you know, this needs to be a priority in our lives? And then on top of that, how do we make it so? With all the things that we're doing and all the fast pace, you know, activities that are always dragging our attention here and there, what would you say for that?
Well, I think it's about prioritizing what you do want to do. And I think particularly in the first world, you know, there's so many choices people have. And I think, you know, you mentioned zone zero before, and, you know, over the years, I've done a lot of work on that. And I think at my age now, 63, I think I'm learning to say, okay, we don't always have to be doing things. We can just take time out and just be as we are. Be here in the now, be in the present moment. We can't live in the past. We can't live in the future. Life, what I've learned is life is always in the present moment. Life is always now. So when we talk about growing food, the first thing to remember is, look, we don't all have to grow food, but if you want to, that's great. And we really only need 4% of the population to grow the food that we need. But you cannot beat homegrown fresh food. Now, I think recently we've been through, the COVID experience, which was, pretty concerning for a lot of people, and it brought on a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry for people. But I know here where I live during COVID, they were selling lettuces in the shop for $15. Now, food security, whether it's in the developed world or the whether it's in the developing world or the first world, food security is a big issue. As we know, in most storage facilities across the globe, particularly in the first world, there's only enough food stored really for 2 to 3 days. Now, if the transport systems shut down, which I know back in the 70s, a truck driver pulled his rig up across the road, a major highway in Australia, and panic buying happened and the shops ran out of food pretty quick. But look, to grow food at home, what we want is nutrition, freshness, okay, and diversity. But growing food at home can be very relaxing and enjoyable, and a really great way to teach your kids about nature and, soil ecology, teaching them about the beneficial organisms, how the soil food web works and the function of soil, and how plants grow and how everything's connected to everything else within the garden. Now, when we talk about gardening, if you look at a forest system anywhere in the world, okay, you can find virtually all of the permaculture principles in a forest system. Everything's connected to everything else. Everything's supporting everything else, so it's just a whole cooperative system, but nobody's ploughing the soil. Nobody's applying fertilizer. Nobody's watering. Nobody's planting. Nobody's pruning. So how does that forest system function and survive on its own? But it's also self-regenerating and self-renewing, and it builds its own soil. So if we observe the forest system, we can actually bring that back to the garden and do the cultivated ecology at home in a zone 1, and it's relaxing, enjoyable, and you're getting food that's full of nutrition, and it's right at the front, or the back door of your house. And you cannot beat homegrown food because you know where it's come from, you know that it's healthy, you know it hasn't had biocides applied to it, and it's been grown in a living soil. And it's really important to understand that growing food at home is just a great way to live your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, and the thing to remember is just start with 1 or 2 square meters. Start with that, then slowly build up. Gain your experience and just grow according to what you eat. Try and grow the seasonal food you need, and grow according to your diet.
That's great. Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, and it's fun, I think, to get into that experiential mode, where you sort of take that chance, like you said, of making mistakes, and that's such a part of it for me, because if we're always so worried about being perfect with this thing that we have no real control over anyway, it's a magical process. I see it as something where you go and it's amazing how everything can work, like you said, in the forest systems, how it all works itself out and is able to create balance kind of on its own, like the spinning top, that doesn't really need your help, but if you get it in motion, and that's the part that I really am intrigued about permaculture, is that once you once you realize what can accelerate things or what can enhance things, like you said, nutrition, and if I think we're getting a better understanding over time, where it's almost like we're relearning what people before us knew, so it's kind of this fun dynamic between we learn more maybe scientifically and get deeper into the microscopic level, but yet this is stuff that was sort of handed down to us that we need to kind of reconnect with. So I agree with that. It's something that just I it's an extension, I think, of being human, really, is having that connection with your food. So but let's
Oh, look, exactly, Brandon. There's connection with nature, and just going back to the forest system, why it functions so well because it's grown on a living soil food web, and that's where we need to grow our food. And I know on a broad acre situation, a lot of farmers are now transitioning over and moving away from the monoculture system, and they're doing regenerative farming. I know in Australia, America, across Europe, and a lot of these farmers have woken up to the fact that they do need to grow in a living soil food web. And it's really fantastic to see that people are, shifting their paradigms, because the writing's been on the wall that if we don't change, we see what happens. Soil becomes salted. It goes, it just goes dead from overuse of biocides and chemicals and too much NPK fertilizers. But I think we've got to also recognise that in the past, don't get me wrong here, but monoculture farming has fed the world, but at what cost to the environment? But now, as I just said, the farmers are waking up to the fact they can't continue along the path they have been. People like Charles Massey here in Australia, and Ian and Diane Haggerty. Also, there was a guy, Ron Watkins, down south of Perth where I live. But there's many, many others, Guy Brown in America doing wonderful broad acre farming. And, it's just wonderful to see what's happening. And as more farmers approach this way, they will tell other farmers, but it's a bit like what GYGO is doing, teaching people how to grow food at home. The more people that grow food at home, the neighbours will see it, then the next neighbour will see it, and we start to build community just from growing food. I'm only on a very small area here in the suburb of Hilton, and I just garden out the front. And look, to be honest, I'm not growing a lot of food here at the moment. I've just been away in the Philippines and I've come back, but I'm trying to get it up and running again. But, it's amazing what you can grow in a small space, even if we supplement some of our food from a home garden. So the message I want to get out to people is you don't have to be growing everything. Just start small and have a crack and see where you end up.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, let's look at it from a different angle. Let's look at it from the design angle, because for me, that's really a exciting piece to it. Because not that you can plan everything out, but if you can take a landscape that's been rejected, by most people, it has erosion issues, it's depleted in its soil, and you can bring it back to life through design. That was something that was always intriguing to me. That we can actually enhance, our environment by using design intelligently. And so not only that, but if you can create a system that just gets better over time, and you've established so much, in the way of earthworks, water retention, restoring habitat, those are all really value adding things that you can create for your property, and so it's not only just a good thing for where you're living and the animals and plants that are there, but it's actually, if you're talking about investing, and that's something I think is really important for people to realize, is that as you're developing your land, it's an appreciating, investment that you can see, amazing returns on over time. But to me, it all starts with that step of saying, okay, I want to do this with intention. So what do you think about the design piece, Greg?
Well, design is the subject of permaculture. And I really want to emphasize that permaculture is about design. And I think, that's what the design course is all about. Teaching people how to read a landscape, how to walk onto a landscape, and how to design that landscape so we can bring it back to functionality and to bring it back to abundance. And, obviously there's different strategies and different techniques for the different broad climatic zones you're working in. But look, with design, I think this is where the zone zero comes into it. I think I've seen a lot of it where people with good intentions, they had this idea of living off the land, and it's easy to talk about, it's uplifting. They get this dream or this fantasy, which is really great, but when it comes to the reality of it, this is where the design comes into it. Now, even before we design the landscape, we should design the life that we want from the point of view of, like, is it a single person? Is it a couple? Is it a family? Is it a community? Okay. And what's the best way to go about that? So the best way to go about that is defining what is the lifestyle that the client wants and what are their needs? What are they actually after? Okay. What do they really want? And sometimes people jump in and they buy land and they build a house and they plant, and everything's in the wrong, the placement of elements are put in the wrong place. And, they don't build a climate sensible house, they rush in. So before you actually get to that design process, it's really important to take a breath, just sit down and think, what is it, what life do we really want? What are we actually after? And what's the reality of what we want to do? And there's only a certain amount of hours in the day, and there's only so many days in the week. And, I remember in the 70s, in the mid 70s, I was about 16, for example. And, the alternative lifestyle movement had started. And there's a lot of sort of talk about communes back then. Today we call them eco-villages. So we've gone from communes to ecological villages. And, there's some really good example of ecological villages or eco-villages. But in the early days, we had this idea of people living together, and it all sounds great. But the first thing, whether it's a family or a community, you've got to have a glue that's going to hold people together. What is the glue that will hold people together? Okay. So from the design point of view, it's quite simple. As those that have done a permaculture design course will know, in methodology of design, we talk about analysing the element. Okay. So a lot of the work I do, I actually work with my clients to actually put them as the chicken. In permaculture design, we use the chicken as an element analysis. What are the needs? What are the inputs? What are the outputs? What are the characteristics? So a lot of my work with clients is to do an analysis of their lifestyle and, their financial situation and their work life, and what do they want from buying the land, and how do they see their future resource base in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. There's a lot in that, but I think if people do that first, they can save a load of money, and they can save a vast amount of time and a vast amount of energy by just taking the time to do simple things like a financial audit, a food audit, a water audit, a budget, what are their yearly living expenses? What are the capital expenditures, the capital costs when they move onto the land, the expenditure? What's that going to cost them? For example, to put up fencing, to put up built structure, to build, if people want animals, there's a lot of cost involved in all of that. Reticulation, there's a whole range of inputs that we've got to actually analyze and put a cost base on that first. So yeah, look, design, there's a lot in there. So I would suggest people start with themselves first. It's amazing the times I've worked with married couples, and sometimes I'll separate them and they've got completely different ideas, but when they're together, the idea is the same. But when you separate them, their interpretation of what's going to happen or what they want is completely different. And it's good to bring that out with people, because then they can shift their paradigm. And if they go through the right process, hopefully they can move forward in the right way and save time and money.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think it's great context for design and what you're saying, and how it can really be something that, is very efficient in the long run. That's kind of, I think, something I've always seen when it comes to the idea of, you spend an exorbitant amount of time designing versus going out and implementing ideally. You've thought it through, and it doesn't mean you have to get stuck, like you said, by overanalyzing, but to really consider those things and go out with the intention that you're gonna actually think about how things are connected enough to where, you've really you don't have to backtrack as much. Maybe, you feel like you're coming from a better place. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, in recent years, Dave and I have been collaborating on projects. Not a lot, but we're just starting to, and I think we'll probably do a lot more collaboration. And one of the things I love about working with Dave, Dave's a master machine operator for earthworks, but he's also an artist. Like, the landscape is Dave's canvas. So Dave will look at the access and the water. Where can water storages go? Dams and swales or diversion drains. How can we design that landscape to retain water? Water is life. Without water, you don't have life. So Dave will do that side, and then I'll come and put the living system over it. But to do that, what we need to know from our clients is, what form of production base do they want? Is it just food security for the family? Do they need to earn income from a property? Have they thought about superannuation? So, trees are a great way for superannuation. We can do sustainable forestry in zone 4 on a landscape. And so there's a whole range of things people have to look at. And I remember talking to Jeff Lawton a couple of years ago. I got invited to teach with Bill and Jeff Lawton at Melbourne Uni a couple of times, and I also went and did Jeff's earthworks course at his place years ago. And I was just talking to Jeff about income, and I often see the fact that if people just want to be on the land, and I would say 80% of people are like this, all they really want is to live on the land and have their zone 1 garden and have a few fruit trees and probably have their chooks. So zone 3 in permaculture is known as the cash crops, or the main crops. Now, from a design point of view, what I work with my clients through is to say, well, if you're growing your food, and if you can reduce your need to spend, maybe you can reduce your need to go and earn income. So you might still have a job in town, and that can be your zone 3. So you might just work 2 to 3 days a week, and that might bring in enough to pay the bills and to run a vehicle. And that's the other thing too. If you move out into the country, fuel prices are going up. If you don't have an electric car, you can be spending, 100 to 150 bucks on fuel a week, getting the kids to school if there's no bus services, taking to after school activities, weekend sports, going in to do the shopping. So the cost can add up. But by keeping your normal job, that can be your zone 3 working in town. But a lot of people can work from home now. But that's what people need to decide. That's the biggest thing. If they're going to live on the land, what yearly income do they need and how will they do that? So once we work that out, is that going to happen on the property, and what scale is it going to happen? So it might be having a plant nursery or growing a main crop of strawberries or blueberries or whatever. It might be having free range eggs or doing free range chicken meat. There's a whole range of business models out there that people can consider and apply to the land. But it comes down to access, structures, and water.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. And so maybe we can talk now about what you're currently up to and what your recent projects have been, so people can kind of see how you've tied it together for yourself.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, the current project I'm working on now is for a NGO called Communities Assist. So Communities Assist was started by a lawyer called John O'Reilly. They're an Australian-based organisation, but they've got support internationally. Just, normal people supporting it, volunteers. John's actually based in Abu Dhabi at the moment, but we've got CA set up a orphanage in Tanzania, and I've been involved with that project for about since about 2015 I've been involved in that project. And if anyone's interested, on my website, Edge 5 Permaculture, there's a video there called Transforming Rainbow Ridge. So basically, when I got involved, it was a bare degraded piece of land. John got in touch with me through an associate, and he rang me. I ended up going over there. We've done several courses over there. We've got a team of local guys now. We've just put on a agronomist, a full-time agronomist. That's been the missing link. But now we're doing outreach work too. So we're starting, I've actually got a team out there today at a place called Senior School. It's about the CA project in Tanzania. It's at a place called Moshi. And Moshi is the gateway to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. So our site is in a place called Malasita, about probably 10 minutes outside of Moshi, the main town. And Senior School is about probably an hour and a half away from Malasita, and it's towards the Kenyan border, and it's in a national park, and there's a school there. And to cut a long story short, I recently did a business plan for the whole project with approval from the board. What we've done, we've actually we've put the children into this school at Senior School. It's like a government boarding school. We were having a few issues, and it just made sense to have the kids in a government school where they're getting learning. They come home on holidays. What we're doing now with the actual old orphanage site, it's still the home of the children, but we're not taking on any more orphans, just due to some local, not politics, but just, what would you say, interference. And it just, it's very difficult to manage. So the kids are better off where they are now in the school. But what we're doing, our team from CA, they're doing the outreach work at the school. So we're working with the school, the teachers and the children. We're teaching them permaculture design, and it's very marginal land. It's a very barren landscape. You know, the rainfall is only about probably 300 mil a year. And, you know, there's wild animals that come through, you know, giraffes and zebras, and we've got the domestic animals as well. So we're going through the process. We've designed it. We've done it. We're working on a master plan, and we're starting to teach the children to grow food. So we're trying to build the soil food web, and we go out there. Our team goes out every fortnight, and I'll be going over there in probably November and early December, running some training programs. So that's something that we want to promote, to get international students to come and actually do cross-cultural learning and learn what it's like to do actual beneficial aid and doing outreach work from the reality of, you know, this is what permaculture is all about: transforming community and transforming landscapes, and really creating the knowledge from within a community that they can actually do the design, they can apply the design, and within 1 to 2 years, we make ourselves obsolete. In all of my projects, that's what I try and do. So that's the current project. And one I did just before COVID hit. I was working for an NGO called ADRA, and one of the countries I went to was Rwanda, and I visited Rwanda twice over 2 years. The first visit was a 10-day kitchen garden course, and then the second visit a year later was to do a 12-day permaculture design course. And from both those trainings, I got a reference letter from the country director of ADRA to say that they've now put in over 13,500 home kitchen gardens.
Wow.
And it's the first time they've stopped generational malnutrition in that bioregion. That's just from home gardens without working with subsistent farmers. But now, one of the things ADRA did quite well was they invited local agronomists, and they had their own agronomist, and they invited community leaders, and permaculture is spreading throughout that bioregion. But also the curriculum that I developed, they've actually put that in the school system. The ministry has adopted that, and that's what they're using to teach people how to grow food from your back door.
That's fantastic. And I really I think that's a strength of yours that I've seen, you know, is that you've got the ability to meet people where they're at, you know, whether it's a community level, whether it's a big project, you know, on a big landscape. But I think what hits home to me in those stories right there is just that, you know, you're teaching people how to fish, so to speak. You're giving them the tools that they need to go out there and take this information in. And what a better way than to, you know, talk to the kids and get them engaged and have that be something that, you know, they can learn as they go.
Yeah, and look, I think it's really important to do that. And I think as I experienced myself after I did my first design course, I felt a bit paralyzed, as Dave talks about, you know, paralyzed from over analyzing. And one of the projects I'm working on at the moment, which just happened yesterday, Dave and I and Lisa Mollison, we're actually going to be running some training in September at Lisa's place, you know, the farm, Tagari Farm, where Bill had the publishing company. Lisa's on the farm, and so we're working as a guild to actually offer people a process to get away from that paralysis, you know, being paralyzed to do something. And I've experienced it, and we all do to some extent. So we're hoping to actually offer people a way to analyze what they have already and help them in the process, and then mentor and monitor what they do, and just be a sounding board to help people. And it's mainly a focus with Tasmania. That's what Lisa wants to do. So just focus on helping people within Tasmania, but what we teach can be applied anywhere.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
we'll see what happens with that one.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm in Costa Rica myself, and I have a casita that we just finished, and I'd like to invite people out to actually, learn those skills by experiencing them, and that's what I did, in my journey, was to visit farms, stay there, and exchange my time and my effort, for a room board and to be able to gather that experience. And so, yeah, I agree that it's getting into that point where you're able to apply it. And that kind of goes back to our earlier conversation, that once you get the PDC, you can have the glasses that you can put on effectively to really make those connections and start considering things more holistically, I think, and then you can go out there and just make mistakes and apply and go figure it out. And I think the mentorship is really important too, finding people that you really um, can say, okay, what have you done, and what can I actually, can I stand on your shoulders a bit to see a little further, and to take this the food growing thing, is, to me, it's almost like it takes that village, mentality. If you take, the idea that, for us to really be in balance, I think we need to have that, the elders, still there and in place to be able to share it with the kids. And so that, it has to start somewhere, so I think that's great.
Oh, yeah, look, it does have to start. And I always remember Bill talking about, the prime directive of permaculture. Bill used to say, the only ethical decision is to take responsibility for our own existence and that of our children. It's about that responsibility, taking responsibility for how we want our life to be. And I think by taking time out, I'm just looking back on my own experience. I can only talk from my own personal experience, and without going into a heap of detail, there was periods where my life was a bit dysfunctional, and and life is a journey. But for those that are wanting to do permaculture, what I suggest is just take some time out and just sit down in silence and just see what comes up, and don't rush in. But I think designing for your own life first before you actually start designing the landscape is very, very beneficial. And as I said before, it will save a lot of time and money.
Well, that's great. I think, one of the things I wanted to mention here too is that we're looking at creating a masterclass, that we can create a series where people can dive into some of these topics. And that topic jumps out at me, Greg, is, design your life. And that could be the foundation level, start with this. Here's your maze, and we got to get through this thing together. And I think that starting with the idea that you're the element, that you got to look at how you're connected in, if you want to be in this place where, we take accountability and we say, all right, I'm ready to step up in my life, because I think we're not going to always supply everything. Like you said, we need community. We need other people to be able to do something besides what we offer. We can't do it all. So we still need other people, but at the same time, we can do our own homework and we can define how we want our life to be and plug into community as we've picked our own selves up. We can plug in. And at that point, I think that there's really some magic that could happen.
Yeah, look, I think master classes are a really great way to go. And I think it's a good way to go in regards to just giving people reassurance and the confidence that what they're doing is worthwhile, and to let people know permaculture is a journey. You're not going to learn permaculture all in one day. And I'm still learning, and, I still make the odd mistake, but I'm still learning. And there's new techniques and different strategies that come out all the time. And we have to be able to shift our paradigm to move along with, best practices and again, Bill was always on about evidence-based solutions, common sense solutions. What has worked, what does work. But if something else works better, we've got to be open enough with our paradigm to move on and say, okay, well, that could work really well too. The technique or the strategy. It's very, what would I say, frustrating if people get stuck in being dogmatic, and I think permaculture is very fluid, and it has to be fluid, and we've got to move along with new discoveries. We can't just be dogmatic saying, oh no, this is in the design manual, or this is part of biodynamics or whatever. We do learn new things as designers. So I think masterclasses and forums are a great way to share that knowledge and mentor people and just help people along the pathway.
Great. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for joining us today, Greg. I think it was amazing. We'll have to have you back on at some point. But yeah, for those of you guys that are interested in the masterclass, click the link below in the description and you can learn more. We're really looking forward to offering some amazing one-on-one and an expert panel, for you guys who have questions. Maybe you're developing your property, maybe you're looking at new property. Those are both really important, I think. You still need to have that foundation, whether you've bought your property already or not, and so we're looking to make sure that people have the tools and resources that they need, to be able to start that journey. It's never too late, to start. There's so many things, that are a part of that. So Greg, thanks so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
No, look, thank you, Brandon. And just before I say goodbye, what came to mind as you were speaking, for those that are listening today, it'd be really great if they could get in touch with you and just say, what would they like from a masterclass? What do they need? Where are they finding it hard, or where do they get stuck? What do they actually need from a masterclass where we can actually listen to them and just guide them and help them solve the problems they may be facing?
Yeah, agreed. That sounds great. So we can open that up and see. Let us know. Get in touch with us. info@growyourgrassoff.com. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next time.
Don't forget to like, subscribe if you like this content. There's also other videos that we can share with you. Feel free to check those out. We'll see you soon.